We can go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for being here with us today. Welcome to our Medicaid 101 webinar. My name is Tina Rucci. I am the Coalition Coordinator for This is Medicaid Coalition. Our goal today is to provide an overview of medical assistance, which is Minnesota's Medicaid program. We'll discuss the program's impact through the lens of COVID-19, and we'll also hear stories from Minnesotans who thrive thanks to Medicaid. We will have time at the end of the event for questions and answers, so please put all your questions in the chat and we'll get to those after the presentation. And now I'm going to hand it over to Michelle to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Tina. My name is Michelle Sancartier, and I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at Minnesota Social Service Association and a member of the This is Medicaid Coalition. So just give me a minute here while I pull up the screen sharing. And Dana, it looks like it says host disabled participant screen sharing. So I don't know if you can allow that.
Sorry.
All right, there we go. Perfect. Okay. All right, can everybody see that? There it goes. All right. So today we're going to talk about an introduction to Minnesota's medical assistance program. This is running away without me here. So you're probably wondering who the This is Medicaid Coalition is. So the This is Medicaid Coalition is a group of nonprofit organizations from across Minnesota working to protect Medicaid from harmful changing and funding cuts. We're also working on thinking about, proactive policy and what we can do to protect Medicaid that way as well. So we're a group of nonpartisan organizations that advocate or directly serve people who access healthcare and supports through Medicaid. So as you can imagine, that's a pretty broad statement. And so we are a large group of organizations locally and also regionally across Minnesota and in some cases nationally. So you can see a list of our members here. And so some of this typeface is pretty small, but it just gives you an idea of who our members are and who is at the table. And this is just another slide showing our members across the board. And you can probably see some and pick out some that you know. All right, so why does Medicaid matter? So Medicaid aligns with our values for caring for children, families, people with disabilities, people with mental illnesses, low-income adults, and older Americans, and really aligns with our values that every individual should be able to receive the treatment, medication, services, and preventative care that they need. It also cares for our communities. So a large number of Minnesotans use Medicaid and access Medicaid to get care. So over 1 million Minnesotans, or 1 in 5, are enrolled in our state. And then Medicaid needs to be preserved as a pillar of our system of care now and in the future. So it provides people with a decision, an option, and the ability to receive care, which is incredibly important because oftentimes Medicaid is serving those who don't have a lot of decision in their care, and this is something that enables them to access that. So we're going to talk a little bit about the basics of Medicaid. So we're going to start at square one. So what is Medicaid? So Medicaid is healthcare insurance established in 1965 along with Medicare. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of folks in Minnesota are on Medicaid. So it currently pays for the care of 1 in 5 Minnesotans. And some of those vulnerable populations that I mentioned earlier, just want to highlight. So older Minnesotans, people with disabilities, children and families, and low-income adults. Really important to note that Medicaid is an entitlement. So if you qualify for it, you receive it, which is incredibly important to protect that, because as we've seen a lot more people during the pandemic have needed to access Medicaid. So incredibly important that this remains an entitlement. So I want to go over some of the statistics in Minnesota. And so this graph is from DHS, and it goes over the cost of care by eligibility type, and then the enrollment numbers by eligibility type. There's a lot of numbers on this screen, but just really important to note that some of the smallest enrollment groups, that is where the largest total cost of care is coming out of. And that is okay, and that is important because that reflects our values in Minnesota. And so important to note that on this slide. All right, so I want to talk briefly about who pays for Medicaid. And I'm going through this pretty quickly, but we will have time for Q&A. And also, if you have questions and answers, I'm pretty sure you can type those into the Q&A box now, so please feel free to do that. So Medicaid is funded through a federal-state partnership, and most of Minnesota's Medicaid spending is matched 1-to-1. And so very important to note that, you know, Minnesota isn't the only entity paying for Medicaid. We have that match rate through the federal government. So the government pays for 90% of the cost for people made eligible for Medicaid through the Affordable Care Act, which is also important to note. All right, and then lastly, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have had a COVID-enhanced match from the federal government, which has been very important. Like I mentioned earlier, the number of people that have needed to access Medicaid during this time has increased. So very important that the federal government has matched some of this cost or increased that match by 6.2%. And you might have heard this referred to as FMAP. And so if you've heard that term thrown around, that's what that means. It's the federal match or the federal share of those costs. Okay, and now I'm gonna pass it over to Dom from Wilder, and he's gonna go over payment models and the rest of what we have to share today.
Hey, thanks, Michelle. I'm Dominic McQuarrie, Director of Public Policy and Community Relations with the Amherst H. Wilder Foundation and a member of This is Medicaid, and happy to talk about a couple of wonky things at the end of the presentation here. So going to quickly just talk about some of the different payment models that we have for Medicaid in Minnesota. If you could click to the next slide, please, Michelle. Awesome. So we have a couple of different models here in Minnesota. So we have the fee-for-service model, which is the gray part of that pie chart that you see there. It's about 20-ish% of the folks on Medicaid are under the fee-for-service model. And that's a system where the state directly pays a flat rate for the different services that people access who are covered by fee-for-service Medicaid. The vast majority of folks who are on Medicaid are actually under the managed care system, which sometimes you might call or be referred to as PMAP, Prepaid Medical Assistance Program. So the state actually contracts with private health insurers, nonprofit health insurers, often called MCOs, so managed care organizations, folks like Blue Plus, Health Partners, Prime West are managed care organizations, and they get a monthly capitated payment from the state to cover their Medicaid population, and then they pay the providers for the services that are used. So essentially the state pays a flat rate for each person who's covered by that MCO, and then the MCO is the one that's actually responsible for paying to the provider. I think about half the states in the country are under some sort of divided setup where there's some fee-for-service folks and some managed care folks. Next slide, please. So then what's covered by Medicaid? Important. Of course, you know, we care a lot about who is covered, but it's also important that we talk about what people can actually access when they are covered by Minnesota's medical assistance program. So if you could click to the next slide, please. So Michelle talked a little bit about this, that, Medicaid was created way back in the 1960s with Medicare, and there's a certain, when these big pieces of legislation get passed, there's a certain thing that's put in our brain about who they're for and what they cover. And Medicaid is actually an extremely flexible and adaptable program that over the years has changed a lot. So many people don't know that, for example, it covers about 1 in 2 residents in nursing homes in Minnesota, or it helps ease the burden of about half the births in the United States of America. So it is covering a lot of those things like nursing homes, which a lot of people in the public generally think of as Medicare. That's our healthcare program that serves older adults in the United States. But it's actually oftentimes the case that it's a blend of Medicare and Medicaid. And Medicaid is that thing that's coming to help make sure that we're lifting everyone up and they're able to access the services that they need. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Michelle. So at This is Medicaid, we like to talk about the promise of Medicaid and what that means. So there's the federal promise, and more accurately, it's probably the federal mandate is what we should call it. So in order to have our medical assistance program, what you see here is basically the list of the federally mandated services that our medical assistance program must cover. So anybody who is accessing their healthcare insurance through medical assistance anywhere in the United States needs to have access to all of these bullet points. Of course, things like inpatient hospital services, outpatient hospital services, but also things like nurse midwife services. So like I said, it's very broad in terms of the things that it covers. And Michelle, if you could go to the next. So the last slide, and I apologize if I'm moving too quickly, and of course we can share these out if anyone would like these lists. The last slide was the federally mandated floor, but then as Michelle talked about earlier in terms of the payment and it being a partnership, what we choose to cover is also a partnership. So in Minnesota, we've decided that the federally mandated floor of services is not what Minnesotans deserve. Minnesotans deserve access to a more comprehensive list of services, including things like behavioral health services, home and community-based services, alcohol and drug treatment, hospice care, and I don't need to go down the whole list, but over the years, Minnesota has reached out to the federal government through state plan amendments or waivers, which we're not going to get into deeply in this presentation, but we've said, hey, these are things that are really important to the people of Minnesota, our folks who are covered by medical assistance. We think that these are services that we should cover and pay for jointly as the state and the federal government. And the list of things on this slide are things that the federal government has agreed with us that, yes, these are important services. We're happy to share that load and share that payment with the state of Minnesota to make sure that medical assistance beneficiaries have access to these services as well, on top of that federally mandated floor. And Medicaid COVID necessity. Of course, COVID-19 is greatly impacting everything that's going on in our lives right now. And obviously, it has a lot to do with healthcare and just the overall health of Minnesotans. And Medicaid has played an important role in this COVID environment. Michelle, if you could go to the next slide. So I think the really important things for us to point out about medical assistance and during this COVID time is that it's reliable, and Medicaid has been around for nearly 55 years. It's been there as a safety net program, yes, for the people who are covered by Medicaid, but also I would say for the people of the United States and the people of Minnesota, that it's flexible, adaptable. We've been able to add on things and waivers like for telehealth, better access to services, and make sure that people continue to have continuity of care as much as possible in this pandemic scenario. And that's been essential, that safety net, that when things and the macro economy start to go bad, and when, people's everyday lives aren't necessarily going the direction that, they would hope it would go, that Medicaid is there to ensure that they can continue to access basic health care to help them have the services that they need and maintain their health, which is doubly, triply, quadruply important in the context of a pandemic, that people can be assured that they can still access the basic behavioral health and physical health care services that they need for themselves and their family. So Medicaid, we've seen as an invaluable service in the context of COVID and the pandemic. So our final slide is just how you can reach us. Of course, we send out emails. I'm sure that all of you get them regularly from the coalition. We're very close to launching a new website. We have an existing website that you can access there, but we're right on the precipice of having something that's fun and hopefully a little bit more informative and helpful for both lawmakers and the advocates and stakeholders that are a part of This is Medicaid. And we're very active on Twitter and also Facebook too. And you can always reach us at thisismedicaid@gmail.com if you want to directly email us. And Tina, who helped open the meeting, is closely monitoring that. And you can reach any of the members that Michelle talked about at the very top just by reaching out to the coalition in general through these channels. And I am going to close my portion, and we're going to get to the best part of the presentation today, which is some of the personal stories about the importance of Medicaid. And our first speaker that we're going to have is Kelly Leibold.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dominic, and the rest of the coalition for giving me the opportunity to speak today. It is something that's greatly influenced my life, and I might not be where I am today without it. I live in Pine Island, Minnesota, just north of Rochester, and I graduated Pine Island High School in 2014. I instantly fell in love with my community, getting involved, volunteering for different events. I attended city council meetings for fun just to see what was going on. I also volunteered with the Cheese Festival Committee, the local arts group, and other organizations. By 2016, I was living in my first apartment on my own. I was working my first full-time job in a copy and print center in Staples in Rochester. But in the fall of 2016 is where things started to take a turn for the worst. I randomly started feeling really dizzy. I was nauseous. I had spells of vertigo. I was fatigued. And I dealt with these side effects for a month. It was misdiagnosed as misplaced inner ear crystals, vertigo. And finally, after pestering from myself and family members, we finally got them to do a CT scan in November of 2016. In that CT scan, they saw a mass in the back right side of my head. And then just 2 days later, I found myself in emergency brain surgery to remove a cancerous tumor the size of a lime. It was very scary to have this happen at such a rapid pace. You know, one day I was calling into work, and the next day work heard about everything that was happening. I was forced to leave my apartment, move back in with my parents, leave my job, obviously. And then after that emergency brain surgery, I still had a month of radiation and 4 months of chemotherapy treatments before me. The radiation itself was in January of 2017, and then in the spring of 2017 is when I underwent my chemotherapy treatments. And what was especially frustrating is the type of tumor I was diagnosed with is typically found in kids under 14. So as a 20-year-old, they couldn't really identify why I had this tumor or what exactly my treatment plan looked like. Now, in the thick of my chemotherapy treatments in the spring of 2017, it was officially 6 months after my last day at work. Previously, up to this point, I had been covered under my employer insurance, Staples, because I was a full-time employee. But after 6 months, Staples said, "Hey, are you still at your job?" I said, "No, I'm undergoing treatment still." And since I was not at work and not going to be at work, my short-term disability leave ended, and they completely dropped me from their plan. So not only was I undergoing these rigorous cancer treatments, but I suddenly had to find new healthcare insurance in the middle of that all. That's when I applied for Medicaid, and that helped me finish out the remainder of my treatments. And Medicaid has really just helped me thrive to this day. After all of my treatments were done in 2018, I started adjusting to my new normal again. So I got back involved in community activism. I was the executive director of the Pine Island Area Chamber of Commerce. This gave me an incredible opportunity to make relationships with local businesses and organizations. But then at the end of 2018, I started to have thyroid issues. I was really nauseous again all of a sudden. I was super fatigued, so I had to leave my job again at that time, and Medicaid still kept me going through all that. After I left my job again in 2018, I decided since I have time on my hands, I'm going to run for Penn Island City Council. I was elected in the fall of 2018, and I'm currently serving a 4-year term. It's been an incredible experience through City Council, through the chamber, through my community volunteerism and activism, to really live my best life under my current circumstances. I still to this day struggle with fatigue, with balance issues. The tumor was removed from my cerebellum, which is the part of your brain that deals with balance and coordination. And it's constantly frustrating to think about, what I want to do and how my body physically won't let me do certain things. So Medicaid really is the fabric in our communities and allows me to survive and thrive, still contributing to my community while having this peace of mind to know that I am covered. So I am super grateful to be a cancer survivor and to volunteer with organizations like the American Cancer Society and at events like This is Medicaid, just to help share my story, to show that this is what a successful Medicaid story looks like. I'm able to contribute to my community and, live my best life. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing that story with us. Next up, we have Rebecca from the Minnesota Brain Injury Alliance. Rebecca, take it away.
Okay, there. Hi, my name is Rebecca Preston, and I live in Golden Valley. And I have lived with a brain injury since 2005 when I was T-boned by a drunk driver. I struggle with a cognitive disability, which keeps me from being as organized as I want to be. Because of a brainstem bleed, I'm not able to do the creative things I used to do. I get really sad about the fact that I can't do those things. And so it's really important that I have friends and family that remind me that I can do things, like advocate for people with disabilities, for a better life for people with disabilities. Part of the problem for me in being poor is that I cannot do or have anything. I cannot go on vacation somewhere, have a car again. I just don't have the funds. I can pay my spend down today, paid by a special needs trust before, because I am finally living in subsidized housing and I can relax a little in my finances. I pay a third of my income in rent. I have to be careful and watch my finances so that I do not have too much money in my checking account because the income and asset levels are so low. At this time, the asset limit is $3,000 and the income limit is $862 a month. There's hardly rent you can get for that little. At any time, if my income is $862.01, I can be kicked off of the Medicaid program. And this will be very hard for me because Medicaid pays for the services I need to live independently. 10 years ago, when I first started to talk about the spend down and that the percentage needed to be higher, I was paying $450 of my income, about $800 for my spend down. Today I pay about $300. I'm very grateful for Minnesota Brain Injury Alliance, Governor Dayton at the time, and all of my legislators for all of the work they have done to lower the spend down bill. Please show support for people with disabilities. The spend down income and asset limit and complexity of Medicaid make it very difficult to climb out of poverty. If I was able to save and keep more of my income, I might be able to afford a car someday, so I don't have to rely on others for my transportation, or even get a keyboard so that I can finally learn to play the piano again. Please don't say that you stand with people with disabilities. Show that you do by voting for the policies we are asking for. Thank you so much. That's all.
Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing your story with us.
Sure.
Lastly, we'll hear from Amanda Adkins from Gillette Children's. Amanda?
Hi, I'm actually gonna, can I share my screen? Is that possible?
I think, yes, I think we can enable that. Just hold on for 1 second.
Thank you. Because I am the mother of Peter Adkins, so I figured you should see his picture because he's adorable and I kind of like him. So this is my family. That is Peter Adkins. He is 9 years old. When he was born at Regent's Hospital, and my pregnancy was completely fine, or so I thought. I caught cytomegalovirus, or CMV, that attacked him when he was 1 month. He should have been miscarried or stillborn, but he is our miracle of miracles, and he is here, and he is 9 years old. 8 hours after birth, our entire world fell apart. My husband was in master's school. I had just finished master's school, trying to find a job in 2011. And we didn't understand what was happening. On his third day of life, we were told that Peter would have severe everything: autism, Asperger's, cerebral palsy, wouldn't live to be 3. And that's kind of scary when you're a parent for the very first time. So it actually took us 4.5 years to actually get him MA. He was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy, from Gillette when he was a year old. And we were told then he should actually be able to get on MA. And that started some of our struggles. We couldn't get anyone to talk to us or remain with us long enough to figure out the entire process. When he was 4 years old, he actually was failure to thrive. We found out he has a rare disorder called esophagetic esophagitis, which mimics an allergy response, and it stops getting calories and nutrients to your body. He was 20 pounds. He had aspiration pneumonia. His lower right lung collapsed while he was playing on the floor one evening, and his lips turned blue and has spiked fever 105. So I loaded up my 8-month-old, Miss Katie, right there, and went into an ambulance with him to Children's Hospital. At that point, it was determined that Peter should go onto a permanent feeding tube to try to help him with everything, with gaining weight, and to hopefully stop aspirating. At that point, we were told, my husband is actually in the Army National Guard here out of St. Cloud, and TRICARE is what we've been able to provide, and just trying to sell things, our own, extra just stuff, just trying to find any extra money to have paid the gap. But we were told by TRICARE that if that little boy needed to have a G-tube, he needed to be on MA. So we actually thankfully finally got connected with a social worker at Children's Hospital, and were able to actually get him set up. So we've only been on this journey for about 4 years. What it pays for is all of his feeding supplies, his medications. It helps pay for his personal care attendant, who has been the same one for 3 years since we switched over to CDCS. It helps pay for his special education at Oakdale Elementary, and it covers those gaps between TRICARE. Things like just recreational therapy, his splints, his wheelchair. He actually outgrew his wheelchair so rapidly in the first month of getting his G-tube that TRICARE refused to actually give him a wheelchair, because that wheelchair was supposed to last for 5 years. It didn't, because he finally was no longer failure to thrive. And so MA actually came in and bought that current chair that he's sitting in. And so, I just implore everyone, please, to make Medicaid a priority. And it does need more funding. It is very difficult to find consistent PCA care because there isn't enough funding to actually have someone come into your home. And that's been a really big thing, having a consistent person who can come into our home and mitigate COVID spread. You're not having multiple people. In our first 2 years with Medicaid, we actually went through 7 PCAs in 2 years because of just how low the payment is to take care of such a sweet and agreeable little guy who just wants to enjoy life with his family. It also keeps him home. It keeps him out of, it keeps him healthier. It keeps him out of the hospital, and he can do things like this, where take a picture or enjoy being able to be outside with our family. It's paid for home modifications so he can bathe more safely in our home, and to, actually, home, beyond the home modifications, we've had something put outside so he can actually enjoy being in the shade and not have to sit in our driveway, which is really hot on a summer day in Minnesota. And that just gives him a quality of life. It sees him as a person. It sees him as the person that he is, the person that we know him to be. And so I just thank you guys for your time. And I hope that you guys continue to support Medicaid and continue to build it, because it is an incredible program of hope and can. How do I stop sharing it? I don't know how to stop sharing it. Thank you. I was like, I'm a preschool teacher, so we don't do this often. We've been in person.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And thank you again, Kelly and Rebecca, all three of you really for being here and being willing to share your stories. This is Medicaid Coalition couldn't do the important work that we do without the powerful stories of the folks who rely on Medicaid to thrive. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Next up, we have some Q&A. So it looks like we have one question in the Q&A box to start. So I'll read that and hand it over to either Michelle or Dominic to answer. First question from Jasmine: is it difficult to obtain Medicaid?
So that's a great question. So it's not difficult to obtain, but there are a few things that you just want to make sure of, and you do have to apply. So you have to make sure that you're eligible, and you can do that on MNDHS's website, or also on the MNsure website, which you can apply online for coverage for Medicaid. Once you apply, they let you know kind of immediately if you qualify or not, which is helpful. If you need assistance, you can go to your county or your tribal office and get help that way. You can also contact a navigator. So there are people who it's their specific job to help you apply for this process. Yeah, others might be able to fill in here. Does anybody else have any tips on how to obtain Medicaid? Rebecca, go ahead. You're probably more of an expert.
Oh, well, I just want to let you guys know that you have to, I'm sorry, you have to have, I suffer from aphasia really bad. So you have to make enough money to be on Medicaid. You have to make enough of little money to be on Medicaid. But also, I have many friends that have given away or spent their money. A friend of mine had a 6-figure income when she started on Medicaid. In order to get the services she needed to stay independent and to live. So that's a big point.
Thank you so much for adding
Yeah.
that. That's incredibly helpful, Rebecca.
Yeah.
I see Amanda raising her hand as well.
For me, it was 2011, and so things have gotten better with how do you do this. There's been a lot of, like Michelle said, people able to actually walk you through it. At the time, nobody seemed to know how to access it, and social workers in both Gillette and Children's Hospital just had difficulty figuring it out as well. So that part of the process has definitely gotten better over the years.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
One thing I'd add, hi, Dana Bacon with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, is that Medicaid means so many different things to different people that is it easy to get? It really depends upon where you're coming from. We've heard from people who needed coverage after losing employment coverage. We've heard from people who have dependents, people who've survived traumatic events. I can speak from personal experience. I have two parents who are on Medicaid right now, doing it through dual eligibility, where they're both living in nursing home settings. So it's all a function of where you're coming from. And we've heard, yes, you can get on it, but it's knowing which way Medicaid touches your life that can really impact how quickly you can find it and make it work for you.
Very important point, Dana. Thank you so much. Are there other questions in the chat, Tina?
So that's the only question that's come in so far. If you do have any other questions, please type them in the chat now. I think I'll leave about 30 seconds if anybody's typing.
Well, we're waiting to see if that happens. I just want to thank again our speakers for being here today, and the lawmakers who are, and other folks who are on the legislature who joined the call today. I think hopefully you joined partially because you wanted to learn more, but also because you know that this is such an important issue and such an important program to the lives of people of Minnesota. So just thankful to be able to share the space virtually with everyone, and hopefully I miss doing these types of events in person. Hopefully we can do those again one day.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dom. And I'm not seeing any other questions come in the Q&A box. So I think that's all we have for today. Thank you again to all of our speakers. Thank you again to everyone attending. Please know that This is Medicaid Coalition does stand as a resource if you have questions moving forward. Feel free to reach out to me at thisismedicaid@gmail.com. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the session, that will get you in touch with any of the coalition member organizations. So thank you again for being here. Dom, Michelle, anything I'm missing?
I think you covered it, Tina.